Welcome to Absolutely Fabulous. My name is Gillian Fennell, also known as Station Mum 101. I love everything about agriculture, especially the people and especially communicating about what makes Australian ag so special.
And I'm Katja Williams, a beef, cattle and cropping farmer, and I love all things ag, and I'm also known as the ultimate farm wife. Together, we are absolutely fabulous, and we are talking all things agriculture beyond the headlines.
And we can't wait to give our opinion to you, and we hope you enjoy it.
So let's get into today's episode.
Welcome everybody to Ag Fabs. Katja's forgotten how to do the introduction because she's got baby brain. This is episode 7. I have no idea of what we're talking about today because I have the memory of a goldfish. And welcome to the episode. I hope you're going to enjoy it.
Welcome everyone. As Gillian has said, we are having a little bit of internet issues today, so there may be a slight delay in some of our audio, but we are going to make the best of things. And our two topics today are reviewing the Australian Women in Agricultural event that we were both panelist speakers at, which was an incredible 2-day conference, and we came live to you from that in episode 6. So we're going to do a review on that. And then we are also talking about Coles and the big supermarkets. So I'm interested to jump into that topic because I'm sure Gillian and I will have two very opposing ways that we go about this conversation and what we want to bring to it. But before we do that, Gillian, let's jump into the chit chat. So what's been happening on station this week with you?
Oh, this week we're mustering and all the kids are home. Eldest is home from work. He's brought his girlfriend with him. Middle child is home from boarding school. Youngest child has vomiting bugs, so she's on the couch. All the family, well, not all the family, but some in-laws are here, some cousins, some sister-in-laws. So it's all a very hectic, very busy time. But yeah, the weather's beautiful. And we snagged an inch of rain last week, so we're doing pretty well for ourselves. And what's happening at your place, Katja?
Perfect. What's happening here? On farm, I can't say too much about really what's happened in the week. As you all know that are following us on our socials, I took some time off this week after some really horrible and shocking family news. So I really sort of just knuckled down a little bit on the household, I guess, and just focusing on family. So I did have learnt over the time that when something shakes you, then it's okay to take time off and sort of go into your little world a little bit. My husband and I have had conversations about, you know, how that happens and how the farm can continue operating, you know, without me being there on a day-to-day basis. So that was great. That was very lucky. That's a very privileged position, I think, where I've worked myself into over the last 11 years. So that's great. The Ultimate Farm Wife wise, we are up to season 7. Episodes 1, 2 and 3 have gone live. So I think in maybe not our last recording, but our recording before, I definitely spoke about Fiona from Outback Lamb's interview. And then so Nicole from the Berry Dairies interview is up there. So how to value add to a dairy farm. And then also Katrina Myers will be live by the time this goes live, which is value adding to an avocado farm. Then Farm Wives Conference, which is happening in April. Early bird tickets will be available December and January, and the fuel vouchers have arrived. So we've previously talked about that. So that's really exciting. We are still looking for some sponsors to cover 2 of the workshops and some of the panelist speakers coming down for that conference. So if anyone's listening and they'd love to jump on board and sponsor a Farm Wives Conference, which is all about integrating into a family farming business, the tips, tricks and advice that you need for that, as well as so much more about moving to the land and running a farm. So guys, great opportunity for that. It's a 2-day conference, as we've spoken about. So pass it along to anyone who you think might be wanting to jump on board with that.
And it's at the zoo, so we get to see cool animals too. So that'll be awesome.
Very cool animals. And the zoo has just announced that they have 3 new giraffes baby giraffes and Tasmanian devil cubs.
Oh, awesome.
Babies. Pups, maybe. So that's very, very cool. But let's jump into our review for the Australian Women in Agriculture Conference.
What an amazing couple of days. It was like all big props to the organising committee, because they're all volunteers, the AWIA board, and I'm thankful enough, lucky enough to know some of them, and they work incredibly hard. And what they pulled off there in Albury, beautiful venue, beautiful town, just amazing conference. It was so positive. Everyone was so friendly and welcoming. The sessions were great, really entertaining and informative. It was a perfect mix. I think a lot of ag conferences could probably take a few leaves out of the AWIA book and really look at how they do things, because it was an excellent couple of days. What was your biggest takeaway from the conference, Katja? That was your first big ag conference, wasn't it?
First sort of politically driven, agriculturally minded conference. So I've definitely been to the DPI puts on a young farmers conference in New South Wales every year. So I've been to a handful of those. But definitely as an industry body, first conference I've been to at that scale. So that was absolutely fantastic. My highlights included Kathy McGowan, Layla McDougall. Just to shout out, there were so many fantastic speakers. What I loved about Kathy's is that she is a true trailblazer in Australian politics as an Australian pioneer female. And she worked on projects such as the Invisible Farmer, so actually getting women recognised in agriculture as farmers, and also bringing to the table the female perspective in politics, in policy making, for how do we get not only recognised for what we do on farm, but also the challenges that come with family farming dynamics from a woman's perspective. So that includes childcare and things like that. And then Leela, if you guys have not seen her documentary, I highly recommend it, Just a Farmer. It did do a lot of screenings Australia-wide, but some of the screening times, such as the ones closest to me, were just not at family farming appropriate times. But she has developed a website now where you can actually stream it from the website. Well worth seeing. We're going to link that in the description below. I also wanted to do a special shout out to their nighttime events. So they were beautifully run. We had the networking night the first night, and then we had the gorgeous gala the second night. Perfect combination of networking but relaxation and really feeling like you were being...
It is hard to describe, but one thing though that one criticism I will have of this event, at the networking dinner / canapes or whatever it was, like cocktail type event, the bloody live music. And every single event I go to, they have a networking event and they go, oh, do you know what would be beautiful? A band. No, we don't need a band, because you can't hear anyone talk. A band is not necessary. There's so much time to talk and network that you don't get during the day. Band is unnecessary. Save your money. Spend it on something else or keep it for next year. We don't need live music at the networking events. Please, please, please. No more live music at networking events.
I thought it was just going to be me, and I was showing my age where I was going to be like, the music was too loud. But if that's all we've got to complain about, it was beautifully run from a participant as well as someone who was there enjoying themselves. It went off without a hitch, and even if they had hiccups behind the scenes, they definitely didn't let that show, and I loved that perspective of the conference as well.
And Cressida, their MC, and she's going to be the future president of AWIA, because they are really, again, other ag community events and organisations take note. Their succession planning is well thought out in advance, so there's no jostling for position or anything like that. She's going to be such a great asset to the organisation and to agriculture as a whole, because she managed to keep all of the speakers, especially us, Katja, because, the three of us, because we had the lovely Kirsten on the panel as well, we can talk a lot, and she kept us well under control, and we kept the conversation moving forward. She did an excellent job.
Absolutely. I did realise that they had actually extended our time in the program to our time period that we initially had been spoken to, but that was allocated to us. So I did enjoy that as well. I think after our link up initially before we even got down to the conference, which if you are organising a conference and you are running a panel session, that was just a fantastic idea. Get your speakers on the panel in a Zoom before you even get to the conference to make sure you've allocated enough time for the chitty chatty ones, like the three of us.
And what I really loved about the AWAI conference, which is what you don't get at some of the bigger ones like the NFF conferences and stuff, is that the speakers afterwards are so accessible because they're part of the crowd. With the bigger conferences, a lot of them, they get high profile speakers, et cetera, so they can jump on a plane and do their very important business things. But with the AWAA conference, the speakers all made the effort to attend the entire event. So if you saw something that resonated with you on stage, or if you wanted more information, you could just find them afterwards at morning tea or lunch and have a real proper in-depth conversation and make that connection. And that's probably the best aspect, I think, from a networking perspective of this conference.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely loved that accessibility and loved being included in the conference as well, like not only just as a speaker, but being there as part of the crowd as well, supporting them, supporting the agricultural community. Really well run. Great point. So Gillian, do you have any feedback on any of the social tiles for this week?
No, we don't. Because we've been doing other things and family and that sort of thing's taken precedence over the last couple of weeks. Plus, we've been running from one end of the country to the other. Social's been pretty quiet, but we haven't attracted too much disappointing commentary, which is great because I do love a fight. But when you try to pick on someone's project or whatever, then that says bad things about you. So don't do that. If you don't like it, just don't listen. Like, there's no skin off our nose. We don't care. You don't need to tell us how terrible we are. But no one has done that directly yet. So no, I think it's all we're going pretty well. We're pretty well received. Yeah, we're doing all right on the social.
Criticism is always welcome. If you have something that you think that we could tweak slightly, then that's always great. As Gillian said, if it's not for you, if it's not your cup of tea, that's fine.
Got our YouTube actually from my 9-year-old who said, "Oh, I saw a clip of your podcast on YouTube. You don't look very good. Your camera's rubbish." So now I have a new camera, a new secondhand camera from her school computer. So hopefully I'm looking a bit clearer. You can see all my wrinkles and everything today. So yes, we have that constructive criticism from a 9-year-old critic,
which we have taken on board
and addressed.
I got some emails through, so some great topics, articles and research being sent through to the AdFab's email address. I'll add it in the description below because I have had other people ask for it, but you can also just send us a direct message on socials. So we've had some big suggestions such as covering big food companies and the food pyramid, the decline in family-owned and run farms in Australia, the real effects on the environment, altering energy, such as solar panels. So what solar panels are actually doing to the country. Guys, great topics, great suggestions. Please make sure you're linking your research or your TikTok reel or whatever it is that has made you submit these questions so that we can have a little bit more context into what it is exactly you want us to look into and discuss. So keep them coming. Also, in episode 1 and 5, we spoke about the WA Live Export ban. A listener has reached out and asked if they can still sign the petition. The answer, I believe, is yes, and we will relink that again in this podcast episode's description. So remember, guys, you can listen to this podcast on all major podcasting platforms as well as over on YouTube if you are not a podcast listener or you just want to see our beautiful faces on the video podcast. And another listener has written in. They have said, "I am a first-generation farmer. Congratulations on being a first-generation farmer. That's not always easy in this day and age. I am concerned about the locking up of land and the pest management you covered in episode on carbon credits. Can you tell us more about the pest management we should start looking into. So this is referring to episode 6, where we discuss raw milk and the true impact of carbon credits from big companies such as mining, electrical, aviation, and big food. And I think we have some exciting news that we will bring up in another episode, possibly next week. So we're going to bank that comment and we'll address it next week with some of our exciting news that's coming up. So just a reminder to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast because it helps other people find us, and keep those comments and emails coming. We love hearing from you.
We do. I know I talk a big game, but it makes me feel so, I'm so happy if what we do resonates with people. It's not about wanting to like big note myself or anything. I just love knowing that people listen and feel included in the conversation. We're quite happy to examine topics or respond to comments, give people a shout out. Like if you want us to say your name and congratulate you as a listener, let us know, because we'll happily do that, because I really think that's super cool.
And we have been talking with a company about giving out an AgFab of the week little gift. So guys, start commenting with your names, your thoughts, where you're listening from, and we will come to you with a little gift with our AgFab of the week. But until we start getting a few more of those personal tweaks on our socials, we'll hold that off maybe just another week.
Yeah, because otherwise it'll just be our friends getting them, and that doesn't seem very fair. But do you know, I had a thought, because you know how we're talking about having AgFab merchandise, so I've been thinking about it. I can't do anything in time for Christmas because I'm hopeless, but I'm thinking if I get the merchandise up and running by Mother's Day, and we'll have like a Mother's Day shop where you can buy, sassy AgFab stuff for your mum or your wife, or, any other female in your life that you want to celebrate who's played a role of mother. It doesn't have to be a biological mother. It doesn't have to be for Mother's Day. There'll be super cool stuff in there for any time. But that's what I was thinking. I think we'll aim for Mother's Day, like prior to Mother's Day launch, and then we'll like have the big ta-da in time for Mother's Day.
Sounds like a great timeline. So guys, if you have some suggestions on things that you would buy AgFab merchandise, what it would look like, please make sure you're popping that in the tile. We might even make a specific tile for that. So give us your recommendation on what you would buy someone.
Yep, we'll put that on the socials. We'll start crowdsourcing our ideas, and look forward to seeing that May next year. Give ourselves plenty of time to organise it.
Gillian, did you have anything else to add before we jump into Coles and the big supermarkets?
No, I think we've covered everything. We've had recovered from our journeys up and down and around the country, because after Albury, my car broke down in Adelaide, and it is still there, because the part was in Sydney, and it takes 4 days apparently to get from Sydney to Adelaide, but then they had a public holiday in Melbourne, which meant it was delayed for 2 days, and now I'm fighting with the Toyota dealership. But luckily this is all under warranty, but we made it home eventually. But I now have no motor vehicle, so I'm still incredibly pissed off with CMI Toyota Adelaide. So that's not a shout out, that's a direct criticism of you guys. Your service department is rubbish, and the people who work there are terrible.
Please address.
Fix it.
Constructive criticism. Please increase their communication with us and their effectiveness in business. Cool. So I would like you to start off, Gillian, with the Coles and the big supermarkets, because I definitely think we went in 2 different directions on this.
Well, it's big supermarkets, like, they're a necessary evil, obviously, because that's the way our market is now structured, and they are an important buyer of produce, especially red meat in Australia. They come second, I think, behind McDonald's when it comes to purchasing beef in Australia, which is good because you have to have markets, otherwise everyone goes out of business. But the big 2, so Colesworth, the hypocrisy of their nonsense is what really sort of winds me up. They have all these sort of ESG, so environmental, social and governance goals, and promoting themselves as good corporate citizens. And yet when it comes time to literally put their money where their mouth is and support products or organisations or growers who are adhering to those good policies and good goals and objectives, they put profit before everything else. And like that shouldn't be a surprise. That's not a surprise because they're corporate behemoths and that's just what they do. But they then put themselves in the position of saying, oh, well, you farmers need to do X, Y, and Z because, you know, we need to have ESG, but they're not doing that themselves. And that's what really gets me. They're saying, oh, the shareholders require it, the consumers require it, but that's not true because the consumers literally have nowhere else to go, so they don't really care. And consumers will generally, the vast majority, vote with their wallets anyway. So wherever it's accessible, cheap, and affordable, that's where they're going to shop. And of course, because they own the most supermarkets in Australia, you don't have much of a choice about supporting independence. So it's this notion that they tell us what to do when they don't do it themselves. That's what really gets me going. But yeah, we do need them, unfortunately.
So I can't say too much on the research for this week because I didn't really put too much effort, but pricing,
Okay.
what I did find is that pricing has gone up, particularly since the pandemic, 25% overall. So 25% increase in the last 3 years, which is a substantial increase. So when they were asked about, you know, what products were mostly inflated, the research says, and their response is, well, it's what's impacted the most with the economy. So that would include dairy products, baking and baking supplies, and eggs, which is why they also have a lot of the time a back order on those, particularly, you'll notice in the dairy and the egg aisle, sometimes they don't have anything there or they have very limited stock. But to me, they sort of seem almost strategically done because they are the most purchased items. They are what you would classify as pantry staples. So to see that some of those products are gone up 25% or even more is actually astronomical. And I think strategic. I don't think it has actually anything to do with what they're claiming. So Coles and Woolies also said that their higher prices were due to higher commodity rises and energy prices. Yes, I can definitely see how that impacts a lot of businesses. Yes, if you own a lot of branches, it's going to seem like that is increasing overall a lot, particularly when you look at it as a whole rather than per business. But again, if Coles and Woolies are quite big stores, they're usually part of a mall. They're usually part of like a bigger structure. And when we're talking about, carbon credits or doing something for the environment, I'm wondering why they're not investing in alternative energies themselves. So whether that is making sure that they're wanting to decrease their impact by putting solar panels on their roofs so that they're not pulling from the grid, they're being semi-sustainable, they're a big enough company, but perhaps they can do that for the malls that they're a part of. Or there's new technology coming out of, I believe it's China and Japan, in high traffic, foot traffic areas. They're actually adding pressure plates into their stores and malls where if people are walking over the top of it, the kinetic energy is being used into actually powering the building, whether that would be something that they would look into as well.
Because they're a duopoly and a lot of the way that they do business is not great when they're sourcing products from suppliers. Some suppliers have a really good relationship with them, and that's really good. I'm really happy for those farmers, but I've heard a lot of stories firsthand from farmers who no longer supply them and have been driven out of business because of their predatory business practices. The only thing they are concerned with, because they are driven by the shareholders and the need to pay dividends and those sorts of things, is profit. Everything else is just nonsense. And they maintain, and this is my personal opinion, I think that they are full of shit because they maintain this facade of being good corporate citizens when in actual fact, what they're not interested in sustainability or anything like that. They shit rolls downhill, so they push it all onto the suppliers and the farmers, like you have to be carbon neutral. So they can say, oh, look at my product on my shelf, it's carbon neutral, but they themselves don't do anything because they're forcing extra costs and extra regulations and everything onto the suppliers. They don't actually, carry the can for any of this stuff. And it's like any middleman in any industry, you need to sell to me so you'll adhere to my sort of wants and needs, otherwise you won't have a market. And, it's very disappointing. You can talk about, what we could do about it, but given the fact that farming agriculture is such a low margin, high input cost game, we don't really have the capacity to invest in building our own supply chains and our own retail outlets. So we have to sell to someone. So we sell to supermarkets and food manufacturers, which is the nature of things. But this notion that they are doing everything good and they are the most marvellous corporate citizens to ever exist, and it's nonsense, because they treat everyone badly. They treat the consumer badly by inflating prices when they don't have to. They treat their suppliers badly. I've never worked for one of them, but I'm pretty sure it wouldn't be a great job being an entry wage, sort of shelf stacker sort of type person, because again, they're so big. They have the ability to access all the lawyers and stuff that they need to write enterprise bargaining agreements that probably aren't great for the employees. So this notion that they can set the tone for what is a good corporate citizen and what everyone else should be doing, I think, is a nonsense. And it's about time that whenever they say all this sort of carry on, that our government, especially because they're the ones who are charged with enforcing any of regulations, say, look, you guys, that's bullshit. So, lift your own game first, instead of, because again, they market themselves, they've got the money to spend on advertising and marketing and all that sort of stuff, because it drives up their share price. And that's all they care about, is profit.
Yeah. I'd really like to hear from someone who is selling to Woolies and Coles about not necessarily their specific arrangement, but the impact that that's having on their business. What are the extra things they're having to do and roll out in the next 3 to 5 years just to keep as a stockist of Coles and Woolies? And I'd also really like to hear if someone's contract has been null and void because they haven't been able to find the finances to roll over, or if they have somehow breached a contract due to values or moral obligations around those specific wordings and contracts. And as you've said, they're not really looking after their producers. I've heard that as well. And I think that's also why there's other small businesses across Australia which are popping up. I can't think of the name of one of them now. They might be Farmer AU or something like that, where anything that is rejected by the supermarkets because it's not a right size, or it's not the right colour, or it's got a slight blemish on it, or it's slightly out of season, they're actually finding a sub-market and selling that through whole food boxes to be able to stop all this food and waste going into landfill, but also, a lot of this produce then gets fed to stock at a lower price. So you're getting a lower price for nothing's wrong with the food. It just doesn't look like the perfect pear or the perfect orange or anything like that. So would love to hear from those guys as well about how that's benefiting their business, because I'm sure that this is being they would start to see an increase in that as people become mindful of its impact. Here on farm, I buy things in bulk, so I use honest to goodness and get flour and stuff delivered in 5-10 kilo bags and have that as my shelf stable objects. So when it comes to Coles and Woolies, I'm only really purchasing nappies, because that's where I am in life at the moment. And when I'm restricted on water on farm, I can't be doing washing every day with reusable nappies and things like that. So for us, yes, I've noticed an increase in our shopping bill personally, but I don't rely on the supermarkets because I've got the space to have our orchard and our veggie garden, and I grow more produce than we can use domestically, so I can and preserve that, or I pass that on to friends and family or community as well. So I can only imagine if you are relying wholly and solely on the supermarket, And if you haven't been taught key life skills in cooking or preserving, I feel so sorry for your shopping bill. Like, that's astronomical. That is not sustainable practice. That is not sustainable pricings. And I think, how is this big supermarkets not able to understand that?
And it's again, it comes back to, like, you know, we're a free market nation in Australia, so, you know, they're allowed to do what they want under business practices, but then they say, oh yeah, but we're really good corporate citizens because look, we give a handful of silver to a couple of charities a year, which again, a lot of times when you go to the checkout, it's like, would you like to donate, you know, $10 to whatever charity? No, you donate it. You're the one making billions of dollars. I can barely afford my groceries. Like, you do it. Or better still, you know, perhaps look at your business structure and they are allowed to make a profit. Profit is good because profit allows people to grow, and they should be paying tax and then employing people, and we need those for an economy and all those sorts of things. But to hold themselves up as this paragon of best practice and corporate sustainability and, you know, being great citizens of the nation, I think is nonsense, because at the end of the day, they're only concerned with money. And they will trample over anyone and everything to get their own way, because it's what the shareholders and there's a rise of what's called shareholder activism. So the shareholders say, we don't like the way you're doing business. And Peter has done this successfully with Levi, because Levi used to have leather tags on the back of their jeans. So Peter bought a significant stake in Levi's and said at the AGMs and those sorts of things, we want you to stop using leather, which was nonsense because, you know, I don't think that's a great use of your power, but that's Peter for you. So, you know, but the shareholders, again, a lot of them aren't individuals. They're superannuation companies who then have to give returns or make investments on behalf of their customers. So the whole way we sort of doing things is just sort of, we keep talking about the cost of living crisis, but we're not looking at the things that we're doing, the structures that exist that are making these things happen in the first place. And it's, you know, I'm really worried about people being able to afford to live. Like, I make, like, you know, again, I'm in a similar situation. We buy everything in bulk. We don't have to pay for meat. We're quite blessed in that sense and very privileged. My son, on the other hand, has to go to the grocery shop once a week now that he's on an apprentice wage. He can barely afford to live and pay rent and all those sorts of things. And I think a lot of us on the land, we have our own struggles and we have our own, people can't afford to live, and that's not sustainable, and I'm really worried about it. And I think a lot of us on the land, we have our own struggles, we have our own problems, so we often forget what it's like to live in town and work in town and have to pay rent and worry about where your next paycheck's coming from and not being able to afford to eat. And, you know, because we've got our own problems to worry about. But I think if we worried a little bit more about each other's problems, we might be able to find a solution to this. Because the thought of people, we're a wealthy nation. The thought of people in Australia not being able to eat a decent meal at least once a day is horrifying, and our government should be so embarrassed because it's unnecessary. So what is everyone going to do to fix it? That's probably the root of all these problems. And the big supermarkets, any big corporate player in Australia has a role to play in this, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, guys, if you're listening and you have a solution or a thought, we'd love to hear it, and we'd love to share it in our next episode. So, Gillian, is there anything else that you wanted to close up before we finish with today?
No, I think I'm good. I think I'm good at the moment. Nothing else to say right now.
So, guys, if you have enjoyed what we have said about the Australian Women in Agriculture, if you are looking for an agricultural community to be a part of, it is an annual membership. It is well worth being a part of, and they do make fantastic change and have done for over 30 years in Australia now. So we're going to link the Australian Women in Agricultural membership link as well. So jump on that. Any questions, send them across on our socials, and have your say on Coles and the big supermarkets, Coles and Woolies. We'd love to hear more about that. And so until next week, like, subscribe, and share with a friend who you think would enjoy this episode. Thanks, guys, and we'll talk to you then.